the circulatory system and blood vessels. This is a plastinated real human. There's someone called a pathologist called Gunther von Hagen that started plastinating humans. After they've died, they donate their bodies to him. And here he's submerged them in microplastics which are absorbed into the blood vessels, and he's removed every part of them apart from what looks like some of their skeleton and their major blood vessels. So this is a really clear image of a human's blood vessels, and you see the thicker tubes in your arteries and veins and very, very fine arterioles, and you probably couldn't see the capillaries because they would break. Very strange image. You can actually go and see his exhibitions. It's called Body Worlds. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it before. There is a permanent exhibition in London. Okay, so the circulatory system and blood vessels. What I want us to be able to do by the end of this lesson is to describe some features of the circulatory system, to link structure to function for the blood vessels, and to compare and contrast the structure of the blood vessels. So here are some features of the circulatory system. So a suitable medium. The circulatory system is a form of mass transport. It's about transporting huge amounts, huge volumes of substances around the body in the form of blood. And we have blood plasma with dissolved substances in it, and then we've also got the red blood cells, which contain haemoglobin, and haemoglobin binds reversibly to oxygen. Okay, so the suitable medium is blood. Mass flow transport. How do we move large amounts or large volumes of blood around the body quickly? Okay, a closed system. So the blood's not just seeping around everywhere amongst our tissues. It's actually within blood vessels. A mechanism for moving the transport medium. How do we move the blood around our circulatory system? The maintenance of unidirectional flow. How do we make sure that blood is always going in the correct direction? And how do we control that flow so we can increase the flow to certain places depending on the needs of the body? So let's link these up together. A suitable medium. So this is blood. Let's see if this pen works. Pen. Pen colour. Let's go with cyan. See if that works. Okay, so suitable medium. Make that blue. And it is blood. And plasma is aqueous, so things that are polar can dissolve in it. A closed system. Let's change our pen colour. See if you can spot another one. A closed system. We've got tubular vessels. Okay. Maintenance of unidirectional flow, which is this one, is to do with valves in veins and venules. So can we find a description that's talking about valves? Valves in the veins and the heart. You're going to be looking at the heart in a lot of detail in the next couple of lessons. Transport, control of flow, mechanism for moving. So a mechanism for moving around transport medium would be the muscular contraction of the heart. Okay, mass flow transport is blood is moved around in bulk over large distances. Which one have we got? Straight blue. And finally, control of flow. We're going to look at this in more detail. The fact that the blood vessels have different diameters, that they're composed of different tissues, and also some of the tissue is elastic, some of the tissue is muscle, and they can control the way that blood flows through the blood vessels. So this is just a little diagram for you. We have an artery which branches off into arterioles, which they get even smaller into capillaries. It's capillaries where substances are exchanged. Then the capillaries join back up again to form venules and veins. Okay, so it is everything is all connected together. The arteries to arterioles to capillaries to venules to veins. And the capillaries is where the site of exchange is, and these are where the cells are within the tissue. Okay? So key points: arteries carry blood away from the heart. Arterioles carry blood under slightly lower pressure than the arteries to the tissues. Veins carry blood under low pressure back to the heart. Venules will carry blood under low pressure from the tissues. And capillaries are where the exchange of substances take place. The capillary network is where the exchange of substances take place. So what are the different tissues that make up a blood vessel? A large blood vessel like an aorta is said to be an organ in itself because it is composed of many different tissues. So the different tissues are, we have the endothelium, which is like lining, squamous epithelium lining cells, and these reduce friction. The cells are permeable. Muscle layer, which can contract and relax to control the flow of blood. Remember, whenever you hear the word muscle, you say contract and relax. We have an elastic layer, which is made of fibrous proteins, and they allow the arteries or other blood vessels to stretch and recoil. So with the elastic, it's stretch and recoil, and with the muscle, it's contract and relax. We have a tough outer layer that's composed of a lot of fibrous proteins like collagen, which is there for protection to stop them from bursting, to add strength. And we have valves, which is also made of very strong connective tissue to prevent the blood from falling backwards, the backflow of blood. Right, so let's see if we can do this little activity. The feature, so it's relative, it has the largest elastic layer. This is going to be the artery. The largest lumen, which is the hole in the middle, is the vein. The largest muscle layer is actually the artery. They have the thickest walls. The thickest vessel wall is the artery, and the aorta is the biggest artery of them all. Contains valves, the veins. The thinnest vessel wall is a vein, and the smallest diameter is the capillary. Their diameter only just fits a red blood cell inside it. So this is our very simplified diagram of an artery. We've got the outer layer, the inner layer made of muscle layer and elastic layer, the lumen in the middle, and the endothelium, which is the smooth squamous lining cells. Just turn that pen off a little minute. You don't need to know these names. You can just say the muscle and elastic layer. You do need to know endothelium, and you can say the outer tough layer. So it's smooth to allow smooth blood flow and reduce friction. A lot of them, especially in arteries, can you see how that's a bit sort of crinkled? bit like a concertina, when that lumen then stretches under high blood pressure, it is able to, because of this folding almost of the inside layer. So the thick muscle is allowing it to, the muscle allows the contraction and relaxation to control blood flow, and elastic tissue allows it to stretch and recoil and smooth out the pressure changes and maintain high blood pressure. If it wasn't for the stretching and recoil, if it just stretched when the blood pressure was high and didn't snap back again when it was lower, then the blood pressure would fall significantly. And we don't want it to fall, because that blood's got to get from the heart all the way to the tissues with just that contraction of the left ventricle wall. And then the thick outer layer is about preventing it from bursting under high pressure. Arterioles, they transport blood from the artery to the capillary. The slightly smaller versions of arteries, they still have an elastic layer, and it's thinner than in arteries. They still have a muscle layer. We've actually come across the way that arterioles can contract and relax to constrict or dilate to affect the flow of blood. When you looked at thermoregulation, vasoconstriction and vasodilation, and that's the arterioles which are constricting or dilating to increase blood flow to the capillaries closer to the surface of the skin, or actually to decrease it when you're cold. The elastic layer is a bit thinner because the blood pressure is not as high. So they have thinner walls and much larger lumen. They have the muscular layer still, because it still needs to contract in order to almost help push that blood back up to the heart. Much less elastic tissue found in veins because the blood pressure is very, very low. They still have this outer coat, tough outer coat to protect them. So blood is carried in veins away from the tissues back to the heart, where it can then be transported back to the lungs to be oxygenated. And we've got our capillary. Walls are 1 cell thick and they're flattened to give it a short diffusion distance to increase the rate of diffusion. They have a very large cross-sectional area because there are so many of them, and this increases the surface area available for diffusion of substances which are required for metabolism or waste products which need to be excreted from the body. The red blood cells are basically larger. The diameter of the red blood cell is a bit larger than the capillaries, so they almost have to fold up to be able to and squeeze to get through the capillaries. What this does is increases the friction between the red blood cell and the capillary, slowing that blood down, giving it more time for diffusion to occur. Remember, try and link to diffusion and Fick's law, because the capillaries are all about diffusion and exchange of substances. This is a little Venn diagram activity. There's the answers for you. I'll ask you to do that later on in the task. Arteries have valves. Do we think arteries have valves? No, they don't. Arteries have a larger muscle layer than arterioles. Well, it is larger, but relative to the actual size of the arterioles, it's smaller. Veins have the largest lumen and contain valves. Is that true or false? That is true. Capillaries have a tough outer layer. Is that true or false? That's right, that's false. If they did have a tough outer layer, that would increase the distance for diffusion and make diffusion too slow to be able to meet the needs or the metabolic needs of the organism. Arteries have a larger elastic layer than veins. Remember, what is elastic layer for? Stretch and recoil due to surges in pressure or high pressure. Is that true or false? It's true. And capillaries have a large diameter, so they are never far from tissues. Large diameter? That's false. If they had a large diameter, the substances in the middle of the capillary would take too long to get to outside the capillary. It would increase the distance for diffusion. Here's another very detailed diagram for you. You're going to have to complete a table, draw a little picture of each of the blood vessels, describe their structure, and then link their structure to the function. So large elastic layer to stretch and recoil under high pressure, smoothing out changes in pressure, and so on. So this picture might be useful for that. You'll have to go back to the video, press pause, and use it to help you do your table. Here's an interesting graph, which there'll be some questions on later. Okay, so it's how we can use data and in graph interpretation in blood vessels. So this one is blood pressure. We've got cross-sectional area and speed of blood flow, cross-sectional area. So as the cross-sectional area increases, the speed of the blood or the flow of the blood decreases. Why? Because there is a greater cross-sectional area